Welcome to the Gastro Girl podcast. We bring together patients, experts, and health advocates who are all here to help you optimize your health. Here's your host, Jacqueline Gaulin.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on this special episode of the Gastro Girl podcast. We're going to be talking about tips for enjoying food during the holidays with one of our favorite dietitians, Emily Haller. We're so excited to have Emily, and we're both in our holiday attire. We tried to be a little festive for the occasion. So if you have your special sweater, feel free to get it and enjoy the podcast with us. But seriously, Emily Haller is a registered dietitian with expertise in digestive health and medical nutrition therapy for gastrointestinal conditions. She's so passionate about helping people optimize their symptoms and quality of life with evidence-based nutrition and lifestyle strategies. And again, we're so happy to have Em on the podcast today. So let's get going. Welcome, Emily. So happy to see you again.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
Eating around the holidays is challenging with or without a GI condition, because sometimes we tend to eat things that we know don't agree with us, and then we suffer with it later, or we may overindulge, or we're trying to manage our weight and we're worried about overeating and eating things we shouldn't. And it can be very stressful, whether you have a GI condition or not. What is your general advice that you give patients about eating around the holidays and how to get through it?
Yeah, that's a really great place for us to start. So, when I think about the holidays, right, these are a wonderful time for celebration, and enjoying festive meals can and should be a joyous experience and a part of that. So as a GI dietitian, I often provide my patients with tailored advice to ensure that they can partake in these festivities while also supporting their digestive health and their symptoms. And that is going to look a little bit different for each person. But general advice, I would first start with routine, right? Like, our bodies love routine. So maintaining a routine with both food and lifestyle, and we could talk a little bit about like what that looks like, is kind of step number one, or like a foundation for managing symptoms, supporting gut health through the holidays. So eating 3 balanced meals throughout the day, not skipping meals. We don't want to show up at a holiday party or event ravenous and really hungry. Thinking about those travel days, whether you're driving in a car, on a train, on a plane, like, are you going to have access to food? Should you pack snacks that sit well with your body? Those types of things when it comes to like managing a routine with food can be super helpful. Another kind of routine thing is giving yourself time in the morning to poop can be very helpful. During the holidays, we're really rushed on the go. That generally is not great for our gut and for our motility. And so that can often, lead to more constipation during the holidays, which doesn't make any of us feel great. Hydration. So staying well hydrated is also going to be key for good digestion. So, of course, drinking water frequently throughout the day. If you're traveling again, maybe having some sort of portable water bottle that you can, have on you. Eating foods that are rich in water as well. So different fruits and vegetables will also contribute to, fluid intake. And then even thinking about fluids that can be kind of like comforting, something like ginger tea or peppermint tea can be very soothing. It can help with bloating. It can help with cramping. It can just feel nice. And so that would be another thing in terms of general advice. And then also thinking about mindful eating practices. So it's not always just what we eat, but how we eat. So making sure that we're chewing our foods well at meals and like savoring those good flavors and, enjoying hopefully the company that's around us. That mindful eating also does support gut health and digestion. It helps prevent us from overindulging to the point to where, it's going to significantly worsen our gut symptoms. Another general advice thing that I often think about and have, spent, years talking to patients about is like advocating for yourself in social situations, and the holidays can be one of them. So having open communication with families, friends, hosts about dietary preferences, needs, restrictions ahead of time can be really helpful. Good hosts usually want to like support everybody at their kitchen table. They want to make sure everyone's included. So are often happy to help accommodate or find ways that they can accommodate you. But there's also going to be times where that's not the case, right? For whatever reason. And so then having a backup plan or plan B, bringing food whether maybe it's a potluck where you can bring a dish or two that you know you can eat and you feel comfortable doing that. Or just bring your own container, right, of food. And that way you're still able to be there and be present, and enjoy, this holiday celebration. But you also know you have something that you can eat that's not gonna, upset your gut. And then lastly, I would also think about kind of coming back to that routine, other strategies that are not food related. So thinking about our sleep, right? Making sure we're getting adequate sleep, sticking to a pretty regular sleep schedule or routine, meaning we go to bed around the same time and wake up around the same time, is really helpful. Managing our stress. Holidays, for better or worse, they are a little bit more stressful, and so having some other coping mechanisms, whether that's like deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, meditation, journaling, being outside in nature, and then also kind of coincides with this other thing that we can do, which is physical activity. So moving our bodies also can help with gut symptoms significantly. And so taking the food strategies plus those other things is a really holistic approach to help with digestive symptoms if you have a GI condition throughout the holidays.
Yeah. And just, to piggyback on those tips, a lot of our patients and people write in asking about alcohol. Some people regularly indulge, other people rarely, and maybe the holidays, they want to try some eggnog with some spiked whatever they put in it, or they want to try some special cocktail. Like, what is your advice, for people that maybe are having a chronic condition like IBS or IBD, and there is some little pressure. Sometimes, we're afraid to not participate because we feel ostracized. Like, what is your advice for patients?
For sure. So first and foremost, like, alcohol is a gut irritant. I mean, for all of us, for all humans, whether we have a, diagnosed GI condition or not, if we drink too much alcohol, we will have negative symptoms and side effects of that. With that said, individuals, people who have IBS, IBD, GERD, may be more susceptible to like the negative side effects of alcohol intake. So kind of knowing your own limit, one, is really important. Some people may tolerate moderate amounts, and that's just fine. So I think in social situations, to like navigate that pressure, like having other fun drinks, if you don't want to drink alcohol, but you still want to have like a drink in your hand, making a fun mocktail. There are so many good recipes online on Pinterest now. Maybe having a bubbly water, again, coming back to that, like peppermint or ginger tea, or water infused with mint and fruit, can be very beautiful. You could put a sprig of rosemary in there. So like you can totally like pizzazz up a non-alcoholic drink to, one, have something in your hand, help you stay hydrated, maybe take a little bit of that pressure off of somebody being like, oh, here, have a glass of wine, have this drink. And then if you want to partake in those beverages and drink them, then that's, again, that's a personal choice. That's completely fine. But I think just being mindful of how much, and sometimes switching in between, like, if you're going to have more than one drink, like an alcohol containing drink and then a non-alcohol containing drink, can also just help from like the hydration aspect, because alcohol is dehydrating.
Yeah. One of the things I do, I'm not a big drinker and never was. And I just oftentimes get like a pretty wine glass if I'm at an event, and have them do some sparkling water with a lemon. And no one knows if there's vodka or what in there. And it's just, it makes me feel happy because I don't feel like I'm going to have this alcohol that I really don't want.
Yes.
It's a great way to navigate. Let's just talk a little bit, there's probably some alcohol wine that may have more sugar than others, and that could impact the gut too. So do you have any recommendations? Again, we're not pushing alcohol. We're just trying to give our listeners options and more education, so they're aware if they're going to make a choice. Like, what are some options if someone does want to have a drink? And is there one that's less gut irritating than another?
I mean,
case by case.
I would say it's case by case. I like, again, all alcohol to some extent, because alcohol is irritating.
Right.
Now, like if you're sensitive to high fructose corn syrup or like excess amounts of fructose, and if you got a drink like a rum and Coke and it was regular Coke that had high fructose corn syrup, that could be problematic. Rum has excess fructose in it anyways. So like that would be like kind of like a double whammy, maybe not make you feel so good. But I think, like if you have celiac disease, you're not going to drink regular beer, right? Because that has gluten in it. So that's not going to be a good thing for you, period. But outside of that, I mean, I think, yeah, if you're sensitive to a lot of sugar, you could do some sort of spirit and like a seltzer water or like a diet soda type of thing.
Oh,
I don't
great.
really like thinking about your like non-alcoholic drink. I love a fizzy water with bitters and lime. I think it's so good and so refreshing.
Oh, interesting.
Like my
Bitters. I never
favorite
thought of that. Really? What's your
thing to
favorite?
go to- That's it. I just
Oh, just
get that, like
bitter.
if I go to a bar sometimes, or like I make it at home, I have bitters here. So I think it's really
Oh,
good.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So speaking of case by case,
Yeah.
is there room, like, we have patients that, all different on the spectrum of how triggering their symptoms are to different things, but is there room to cheat for the holidays for patients if they have a GI conditions? And if so, are there ways for patients to have that one specific traditional family dinner once a year that they normally would have to stay away from? Any sort of advice for navigating that situation?
Yeah. So this really is going to depend on the person and their condition or diagnosis. So if we're talking about somebody with celiac disease, eating gluten food on the holidays, I would say no, because the treatment for celiac is adopting and maintaining a gluten-free diet. In those cases, it would be more about finding specific gluten-free products and workarounds so they could create their favorite dishes that are delicious and they love them and they still have that nostalgia, versus saying, oh, I'm going to eat these gluten-containing foods on a holiday. Now,
That's great. That's great advice, Emily. And I think nowadays there's so many gluten-free products out there that it's not as difficult as it once used to be.
100%. Yeah. I mean, even in the like span of time that I've really been like focused in GI, which has been like the past 8 to 9 years, like the amount of products and new things coming out, it's just really exciting to see. Not to say that it's not hard, right? Especially for somebody newly diagnosed and you're just like, oh my gosh, like all the things I love have gluten, like what am I going to do? And that's where working with a dietitian who's knowledgeable in celiac and like helping you navigate those social situations and finding products that you like. And it does take a little bit of time to like, try things, see if you like it. Hopefully you do. If not, find another product out there. But yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of good new products available. I would, coming back kind of to the cheating aspect. I mean, if you have food intolerance, right, that's different. We're not talking about celiac. We're not talking about a food allergy. Like if you have peanut allergy, you're not going to be eating peanut butter cookies on Christmas. But like if you have lactose intolerance or some other food intolerance, you might decide it's worth the symptoms to eat that food. Right. You might say, I'm fine. Like, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to eat some of this and deal with it because I want to. And that also is going to be very individualized based on like that person and their relationship with, food and their triggers and their symptoms at that point. There's also enzymes, right? So for someone who's lactose intolerant, they can get lactase to help them digest that during the holidays, or really any time. It doesn't have to just be the holidays. For people who are sensitive to beans and legumes, it's often that galacto-oligosaccharide. That's a FODMAP that's in, again, beans and legumes. There's an enzyme, alpha-galactosidase, that can be bought over the counter, just like lactase. And you take that at the time you're eating your, food, your trigger food. And that can help with digestion and symptom management. And then there's another enzyme called FODzyme, and there's a trio of enzymes. So it has the lactase we just talked about, the alpha galactosidase. But the thing that makes that like unique is that it has a fructanase. It has fructanase in it, and that will help digest fructans. And so those are things that are in garlic and onion and wheat, also part of the FODMAP diet. And so those would also be tools that somebody could use to cheat on the holidays and hopefully help minimize gut symptoms.
So they don't have to start like weeks in advance. They could just try it out. And again, we don't want you to go out and buy all this stuff and do it all together at once. Like you recommend like trying one, and maybe before your big holiday meal, just try it out so that you're not on the spot dealing with that at somebody's house.
Yes. Testing advance ahead of time if you can. Absolutely. Probably not maybe the best thing to test when you're like, yeah, at a big party, out of town, away from the comfort of your
Yeah.
home, bed and bathroom and all of those things. And yeah, I wouldn't recommend anybody just go out and buy all three of those. I mean, it depends on your trigger. Like, what are you sensitive to? And is there an enzyme to match that? Now, if we're not lactose intolerant, or we don't consume, just taking that is not going to do anything. And again, the timing is really key. You take the enzyme at the time of the meal that you're eating. So yeah, again, I think there's just kind of just depends on the GI condition, and the foods that are in question.
Well, that's really good advice. I'm glad we asked that question. So, the other thing, you mentioned before was there may be substitutes to, when we're making our pies or our casseroles, and I'm sure there are many, many, but let's just talk about some of the main ones that may be found in traditional holiday meals or sides or ingredients that could be more GI friendly that the whole family could enjoy. Like they may not notice if it's switched out.
Yeah, for sure. So for people who have garlic and onion sensitivity, you could use a garlic or shallot infused olive oil. Those can be purchased. They can also be made at home. Chives, and then the green tops of spring onions or green onions, not the white part, but the green part. Those are all really good ways to get those flavors, kind of those allium flavors, without the triggering component that's in them. I would say in general, like love potatoes, like regular potatoes, sweet potatoes. Those in general, I find to be very gut friendly. They're naturally gluten-free. They are low FODMAP. Sweet potato has, somewhat of a serving size associated with it being low versus high. But for most people, and they're also a pretty common holiday food, but for most people, they're pretty well tolerated. They can also be peeled and mashed and thinned out with like a veggie broth, which can be really nice for somebody who is sensitive to roughage, fiber, kind of particle size. So thinking about somebody with gastroparesis, maybe functional dyspepsia, people with IBD who are in a flare, like kind of changing the texture of foods can be a really nice strategy. Rice and quinoa as well, again, kind of gluten-free, allergen-friendly, low FODMAP, those things can be nice. Herb roasted vegetables. So you could roast a variety of colorful vegetables that you like. There's tons of squashes in season, parsnips, tricolored carrots, maybe Brussels, bell peppers, broccoli with herbs, maybe some avocado oil, toss that in instead of using a really heavy sauce. And so that not only just looks beautiful, right? We also eat with our eyes. It's going to add vibrant colors to the table, to the plate, but it's also going to provide a variety of different nutrients. Those herbs and spices are rich in phytochemicals, which is like a healthful plant chemical or bioactives. They have anti-inflammatory properties. They also just make our food a lot more enjoyable because it tastes good. Quinoa salad, kind of same thing. Instead of maybe a heavy pasta dish with a lot of cream and butter, we could go quinoa. We could do a vinaigrette. We could do herbs and vegetables that we like for flavor. And then lastly, I think a common one that I would think about maybe making yourself versus buying would be cranberry sauce. So you could buy whole cranberries, use some orange zest and orange juice, maybe a touch of maple syrup, and cook it on your stove. It's so easy. It doesn't take a lot of time. And that way you're controlling the ingredients, because many of the name brand canned cranberry sauces have high fructose corn syrup. So that's a way to get around that. And it also can help you lessen the amount of added sugar that's in cranberry sauce if that's your thing.
That is so cool. I want to ask you about tomatoes. How are tomatoes? Are tomatoes okay? Like the little cherry. I was going to say, I love doing this quinoa dish. If to avoid the pasta, make quinoa, and then I'll simmer down those little grape tomatoes with some olive oil. And you could use like you said, infused with onion if you have a trigger for onions and basil. And then I toss it together, and it's almost like having that. Because what I think I like about the pasta isn't the pasta, it's the actual sauce, right? And I love a fresh marinara. So that's what I do with quinoa when I want that Italian flavor.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
So good, Emily.
Yeah, that would be fine. That would be great.
Oh, great. But I think these are such great tips. Now, are there any holiday dishes that may patients may not realize have some trigger foods, just to kind of give them a little heads up, like what they may think is okay for them, but it may be hiding something that could be triggering, just to be aware of.
Yeah. So, we talked about, kind of two. One, this cranberry sauce does have high fructose corn syrup. So be aware if that's a problem for you. Alcohol, right? I feel like that's kind of hiding. Many people just don't really think of that being a common irritant. And then I would also think about like marinades, gravies, sauces, dressings. Those things generally contain things like garlic or onion or wheat or dairy. And so it really depends on like what the person is sensitive to, and doing a little bit of label reading ahead of time. If you feel like, or you really do need to completely avoid that thing, those are where things could be hiding. I would also just say like really high fat and high sugar meals in large quantities can be hard for some people to digest. And this is certainly not an all or nothing thing. I'm not saying like, oh, don't eat any sugar or fat in the holidays. That sounds miserable. But like just the quantity, right? Like, and so that's where like adding some, vegetables and whole grains onto the plate can be helpful to like kind of balance things out.
Yeah, like we all love those charcuterie boards with all the cheeses and the meats, but instead of having like 10 pieces of cheese and meat, just have like a couple, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like moderation. And again, that kind of volume is going to be dependent on the person and their gut. But what are other things that could be added to, a charcuterie board? Like sliced bell peppers and cucumbers, and you can do hummus or a bean dip and salsas and some whole grain, crackers, whether it's a whole grain wheat cracker or some sort of like rice flour cracker. I love like the Simple Mills has some really good almond flour crackers. So just kind of like, again, adding that variety, which looks beautiful and also can help balance our plates.
Good. So one of the final questions is, a lot of times we tend to overeat. And you mentioned this before, moderation, pace yourself. Some people who may not have experienced things like severe bloating or acid reflux, what are your tips for avoiding those situations and overeating? It's hard because we're talking, we're laughing, we're having a good time. We don't realize how much we may be consuming over the course of an evening.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of coming back to that routine, that is going to be important. Like I've encountered so many people that like save up for going to a party. And so that's really not a good strategy. Like eat a normal breakfast, have your normal, lunch. If you're going to a dinner party, eat a snack before, maintain that routine, that kind of the hydration. I find that routine and not being super sleep deprived will be helpful from an overindulgence standpoint. Like occasional indulgence is completely normal and like a natural part of celebrations. So I focus less on like, don't overeat at all, but it's more like know your body and know your limit and what's going to make you feel the most comfortable. Chewing your foods well really is going to help break. Digestion starts in our mouth, right? It's going to help break things down. It's a little less work for our stomach. Our stomach is made to stretch and accommodate, right? When we eat meals. And for most people, it's pretty good at that. There are people with certain GI conditions that have a harder time with that, right? And so that's where we see like smaller, more frequent meals and snacks spread throughout the day to be very helpful. So someone with gastroparesis or functional dyspepsia, for example, you mentioned GERD, right? One of the mainstays of like helping people who have gastroesophageal reflux disease manage symptoms is to be mindful of the portion size that they're eating, because that really large volume generally doesn't sit well with those folks. So that's where we can experience that upper pain, bloating, distension, heartburn. So the small, it is, again, not to like give like a wishy-washy answer. It does depend on the person. Some people can eat a large quantity of food, right, and feel okay. But at a certain point, any of us, if we eat a really large volume in a short period of time, are going to have an upset stomach. We're not going to feel so hot. And also people who have IBS and, IBD just can also be sensitive to really large volumes of food, more so than like your, average person who doesn't have those GI conditions.
Well, my grandmother used to go for a short walk after every dinner. Like she would just do a walk. So like do that with your family, right? Is that a good thing? So you feel like you're not laying down after your first inclination is, oh, I just want to lay down, but move, right? That can kind of help the process, right?
Thank you. Absolutely. A light walk can be very helpful for digestion, for motility. And yeah, doing it as a group can just be so much fun.
Yeah, it's great. Oh, Emily, we could just talk about this all morning, but I know you have patients to see and work to do and probably recipes to come up with. But this has been so great. Did we forget anything, or did we hit everything that we wanted to share with our listeners today?
I think so. I hope this was helpful for whoever's listening, everyone who's listening, right? Like, enjoy your holidays. I hope you can successfully navigate, eating during these times. And again, advocating for yourself, and also working, if you have access, if you are struggling, working with a knowledgeable GI dietitian can be really helpful.
Yeah, this has been so great, Emily. Thank you so much. And as always, it was great to see you in person and today on this episode. We hope we can do some more of these in 2024. But in the meantime, have a wonderful holiday, you and your family, and all the best in the new year. But we'll be seeing you soon.
Thank you. You too.
And for our listeners, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening to this in audio, feel free to rate and leave a comment. If you're listening to this on YouTube, post your questions, comments in the comment sections, and we'll do our best to answer them. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Gastro Girl podcast. For more information and resources, please visit gastrogirl.com. Do you have a question for Gastro Girl? Please email podcast@gastrogirl.com. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in the Gastro Girl podcast are not a substitute for medical advice from your healthcare professional. Please consult a licensed clinician in your state regarding all matters related to your health.